Ooh, this shit got me feeling Chinese. Fuck, boy. Kore, maji de jugokuji ni nata kibun dewa. Quick question. Does this scare you? Does this scare you? How about this? Little St. Benedict's medal? That scare you? How about this? You can't come in. That fuck you up a little bit? No? Okay. Congratulations, you passed. You're not a vampire. Now, vampires are everywhere in pop culture. Movies, books, anime, video games. We, as like a collective people, are kind of obsessed with them, right? But here's the thing. You know, that vampire you're thinking of right now? The pale, aristocratic, cape-wearing night dweller? That's a pretty new idea. Like that's not what vampires have always been. See, the original vampire, the one that terrified villagers for centuries, was way nastier, way less glamorous, and honestly, to me, a lot more interesting. So tonight we are doing a deeper dive. We're diving deep, much like how I do with your mother. Only when she begs. Because your boy got it like that. You can't come in! Just had to make sure in case any got through the first couple seconds of the video. That is not what your mother says to me, though. Holy shit. Wow, okay, yeah, but where do vampires come from? I'll tell you where I come to. That's your mother's box. All right, I'm done. I'm done with your mom jokes. I promise. I'm done is the last thing she'll ever tell me. Whoa, I lied to you. I think I'm done. I think I'm done with your mom jokes. That's what I... Okay. You know, yeah, where these vampires, where do they come from? You know, why do they show up in almost every culture at some point or another in history? And why, at least with the modern vampire, are they so tightly tied to Catholic imagery? It's very strange, but let's get into it with part one. What is a vampire? At the core, a vampire is a creature that feeds on the vital essence of the living, usually blood. In European folklore, vampires were undead humanoids. They crawled out of graves, visited their loved ones, they spread disease, and just straight up killed people. But, you know, before we go any further, let's just get this out of the way, you know, near the front of the video. Let's lay down some groundwork. They didn't look like Robert Pattinson or Bela Lugosi. And I know that might be a bit of a buzzkill. You know, you might have clicked on this video because you're what the chronically online call a monster fucker, which firstly, you need help. Secondly, stop it. Yes. Thirdly, no, I'm not doing Trump in this video. Thirdly, who knocked those fucking towers over? Was it the vampires? Was it you? Who am I kidding? We know. We know for sure. No, we definitely know. And it wasn't vampires. But getting back to the vampires, you know, there's no slicked back hair. No tragic cheekbones. They were described as bloated, red-faced corpses still wrapped in their burial shrouds. Basically, a vampire was your dead uncle, you know, all bloated and rotting and evil. And now I really want to reiterate a point here. If you want to fuck that, you're disgusting. Stop, okay? Bad. If I had a spray bottle, go to therapy. Go to a church. They can't go there. So you should go to a place they can't go if you want to fuck your dead bloating uncle, you freak. We're 6 minutes in. And I'm already scolding you for wanting to hypothetically fuck your dead uncle. And if your uncle has died recently and you're watching this, really sorry. You probably didn't expect that clicking on the video, and that's fucked up, and I apologize now. But if your uncle didn't die recently, but is dead, and you're like, I probably still would, jump. Don't do that. Don't do that. Get help, though. Get help for sure. You should talk to a professional. I'm not a professional. Don't leave anything about fucking your dead uncle in my comments, please. But the important part is that vampires aren't just a European thing. You know, like this modern vampire we have, sure, like that comes from really like an Eastern European and then later French and through literature and this, that, and the other. But they're not a specifically European cryptid, right? They appear across practically all cultures, across several different periods of time. Every civilization has some version of a vampire. You may be thinking, what even is, like, how do we get that word? You know, like, that's, nothing else is called a vampire, right? Like, how do we get to vampire? Now, nobody knows exactly, but I would say we pretty much do. It's kind of like gravity, how like gravity isn't technically proven, so like it's technically a theory, but like we know gravity is real, you know what I mean? That's kind of how like this works. So the earliest appearances are in English newspapers from the 1730s. Like that's where the word vampire is first printed, and like that's when it gets widespread. Because they were reporting on strange happenings in Eastern Europe. Now, there are competing claims of where we get the word vampire. Russian, Serbian, French, German, Lithuanian, and even Latin. What I personally believe, like what I think is most valid, it actually comes from Gag Albanian. You get the word dam, D-H-A-M, which means tooth, and then pier means to drink. So you put it together, dam pier, which eventually is transliterated to vampire. And it makes sense, you know, because around 1725 to 1732, Austria had just taken control of northern Serbia. Can't fucking speak. Northern Serbia and Oltenia. And they started writing down reports of locals digging up corpses, staking them, and burning them. They're basically killing vampires. And these reports spread like wildfire across Europe, right? That panic, which is called the 18th century Serbian vampire epidemic, is what made the word vampire go viral, right? Now, the 18th century Serbian vampire epidemic is a video in itself, and if you like vampires a lot, tell me, and I'll cover the 18th century Serbian vampire epidemic, because it's really fucking fascinating, and there's like official like police reports of vampires and like shit like that. It's really cool. I read through it, and I took some things to kind of put into the video, but I didn't like do a full deep dive, because like I said, that would be a video in itself. But bringing it back to what we're talking about here, what exactly made someone a vampire? Now, again, all kinds of vampires, all kinds of cultures, all kinds of time periods. The one that I'm talking about for pretty much the rest of the video is like the one you're thinking of. You know, that Eastern European 1700s and beyond, like global vampire, right? And there were a couple things that would make you a vampire. One is living a wicked life. You know, you live evil, and death you are evil. You come back as an undead. Another one is suicide victims, which I find interesting. Witches get to die and come back as vampires to these people, which kind of feels like double dipping on like the cryptid thing, so not really fair. But also people possessed by demons would typically come back as vampires, or so it was believed. Or, you know, the classic that we all know, bitten by another vampire. And in Russia, rebelling against the Orthodox Church could get you vampired. That's kind of crazy. That's really crazy to be like, hey, if you don't listen to us, you're gonna come back as, you know, a monster, and then we're gonna run wooden stakes through your heart and burn you again to death. You'll die twice. How does that sound? But I would say that's a hell of a punishment. Get it? Russian Orthodox Church. Hell. I'm funny, and I know it. I don't have to prove anything to you. You shut up. Now, there were some, like, stranger beliefs on how someone could become a vampire. Like, in Slavic and Chinese folklore, if an animal jumped over a corpse, they're a vampire. I don't know the why, but yes, in Slavic and Chinese, if an animal jumps over a dead body, that dead body is now a vampire, burn it. If a wound wasn't treated with boiling water, they're not, like, automatically a vampire, but there's a high risk of them becoming one. But then, like, beyond just, like, the what makes you a vampire, I think the identification rituals are kind of crazy. I want to say this is definitely European, just from the sound of it. But I want to say it's Eastern. I think this is also Slavic. But you would put a virgin boy, much like you watching, allegedly, on a virgin black stallion like me. That's a joke. I'm not black or a virgin or a stallion. All three of those things were incorrect. My wife just said I looked like one. She said I'm hung like one. Good morning to you. That's on the record, baby. But, you would take this virgin boy, let's call him you watching. So they would take you watching, and they would put him, or you, on a virgin black stallion, and they would have you on this stallion walk through a graveyard. And if the horse, like, doesn't want to, like, look at a grave, that's a vampire. Another one of the rituals they had to identify vampires that I find just kind of funny is they would just start digging up corpses to check, like, at random. And if the body looked too fresh or had blood around the mouth, it was a vampire, and you had to kill it. Again, it had to die again. But also, people believed vampires could cause, like, poltergeist-style activity, which was, like, kind of my wheelhouse, like, with my background as... Actually, I don't know if I've said it on the channel before. For a while there, I was a professional paranormal investigator in St. Augustine, Florida. It's like I've seen some kind of crazy shit. I might tell stories about it at a later date. I don't know. But poltergeist, activity, that's things like moving objects, people feeling like pressed down in their sleep, apparitions, shadowy figures, and, like, basically, like, vampires back then were blamed for, like, ghost hunting, like, evidence now, which is really kind of cool. So how did people try to stop a vampire? Not, like, to kill it, but to prevent someone from turning. Now, so there's 4 main methods to prevent a vampire from rising from the dead, right? And fair warning, some are pretty fucking stupid. Just fair warning. Like, the first one is bury them upside down. That's fucking stupid. But another one would be to put sickles or scythes in the coffins so the corpse would, like, cut itself if it rose, which is, like, super edgy and, like, metal to be buried with a sickle. And I kind of want that. Like, let this be, like, my official stamp of when I die. When I die, put a scythe in my coffin. That's fucking cool. Another one would be to sever the tendons in the knees, which is just a hilarious visual. Like, it's not even to, like, stop them from turning. It's just to, like, fuck up the vampire once they are up. So, like, you could be out for a walk one night, and there's just, like, a vampire scooting towards you on his knees because someone just, like, sliced the tendons in the knees and they can't walk right. But also kind of stupid because depending on the folklore, they could fly. They didn't have to walk. So, like, he would just, float where he wanted to go if he couldn't use his knees. Another one would be to scatter rice, poppy seeds, or mustard seeds around the grave. Why, you may ask? Because vampires had a compulsion to count every grain. Now, that's not really explained, which makes me hate it. I hate it a lot, because there's also an Appalachian legend. It starts with an H. I'm not going to say the name. And people will, like, leave a broom up above their door, like their front door, in, like, the Appalachian region, and they'll specifically not sweep their front porches, because this creature, if it goes to, like, attack you in the night, it has the compulsion to grab the broom and sweep every piece of dirt and dust up and count it. And, like, they can only be out at night. And they'll usually be counting until the sun comes up. And then they're like, fuck it. And they just leave. Which is also really stupid to me. Like, I don't understand that part of the lore at all. And, like fae creatures have the same thing also. I think it's just a way that, like, people would explain OCD. Back then, like, you hit there weren't light switches back then. You light and unlight your candle too many times. You probably are a vampire. You know, I mentioned earlier that vampires are pretty tied to, like, Catholic beliefs. I should probably explain that a little bit. In Greece, people would put a wax cross and a pottery shard inscribed with Jesus Christ conquers on the corpse. Now, this is actually the origin of the vampire's fear of the crucifix. It is also the new addition to how I want to be buried. That's, like, cool as hell. I'm gonna put my own addendum on it. Inscribe that on the scythe that you bury me with, and then put, like, the wax cross. Like, that sounds cool. I'm game for that. That sounds sick. You know, and then you get other things that vampires are pretty perturbed by. You know, holy water, rosaries, silver, consecrated ground. These are all, like, classic Catholic protections, which you're probably noticing a theme by now. Vampires weren't just physical threats. They were spiritual threats to these people. And that this part is kind of, like, important to me, because as you may know, I just like flashed a rosary at you in, like, a saint metal bracelet. I'm Catholic, and the vampire myth is very intertwined with Catholic culture. So much of the lore you know of vampires right now is actually from the Catholic Church and its members. Like, think about it, right? A vampire can't touch the Eucharist, which is, like, the bread and wine, right? They're literally cut off from communion with God. They recoil from the crucifix and holy water, which are symbols of Christ's victory over death. They can't step on consecrated ground because the church claims that the dead belong to God, not to corruption. And in some folklore, like I mentioned, you know, the Eastern Orthodoxy, rebelling against the church literally made you a risk of becoming a vampire. So vampires weren't just about disease or superstition. They were damned souls. Souls completely separated from God. And to a lot of people, that's what made them terrifying. You know, it wasn't just the bite or the blood, but the idea that death without grace could trap you in corruption forever. You know, for Catholic Europe, vampires were walking theology lessons. Like, this is what happens outside of God's mercy. And that was really important and really, like, special to a lot of people a little later in the vampire lore here. But it's still very, very important. It was very fun, like, folklore and legend that a lot of the 18th century Catholics had. And now we're on our Helsing Ultimate shit. Now we're on our Sam and Dean Winchester shit. Now we're on our Hansel and Gretel and that one movie with Hawkeye shit. Now we're on our Abraham Lincoln vampire hunter shit. How do you kill him? How do you stop a vampire? Stakes. Not like the meat, like the wood. A spike, right? It's classic. Stake to the heart. Kills a vampire. But it wasn't always to the heart. Like in the Balkans, you would be staked to the stomach or the mouth. Like we mentioned earlier when we were talking about like the prevention, coffins would have like sharp objects inside. So as the corpse bloated, because remember, these were like bloated, red-faced, disgusting creatures, not like cool, suave aristocrats. As the creature bloated, the sharp object would impale it or cut it, and it would essentially cause it to like deflate, which is super sick. And like also decapitation was super common. Like people would just cut your head off after you were dead. But they would cut your head off after you were dead, and because like that would stop a vampire from raising because you don't have a head. But what's also like kind of hilarious to me is they would usually put the head under your butt. I don't know if you know much about dead bodies, but they shit and fart. They shit and fart a lot. So like you would have had your head cut off, mouth open next to your dead rotting asshole. You're just like farting. That's way worse. That's like the worst one, I think. Also, villagers would pour boiling water into graves, stab corpses with iron, or just straight up burn the remains. In Russia and Poland, they took it way further. And I'm gonna give a fair warning. When I read this, I gagged. So that's your warning. They would mix the ashes or blood of a potential vampire into bread, or they would just drink it to protect themselves. So ironically, people fought against vampirism by becoming vampires, which is crazy, but also just like the thought of like drinking a concoction of like dead person ash and blood and water is fucking foul, because like they weren't like cremating people like we are today. Like it wasn't just ashes. There were like chunks of burnt like meat. No. But really, how did we go from the demon possessed, bloated poltergeist corpses to Dracula? You might think you already know the answer, right? Bram Stoker's Dracula, dropped in 1897. It like shaped vampires, right? Not exactly. Because there's two other books that come before Bram Stoker's Dracula that I would say is the real markers of the beginning of this New Age vampire. And the first one comes in 1819 from John Polidori's The Vampire, but spelled way cooler. It's spelled Vampyre, which is like the first introduction of this like aristocratic, seductive vampire. You know, this is like the real start of the fuckable vampire, the one that you probably should not be wanting to sleep with. Right? You shouldn't. But then in 1872, Sheridan Le Fanu, she penned Carmilla, and it adds in the femme fatale lesbian vampire angle, which is great because, lesbians love vampires. Like, if I know lesbians, and I do, I know that they love three things, right? Other than, the obvious women. They love Subarus, vampires, and the 2012 Macklemore haircut. Oh, shit. But in 1897, that's when we finally get Bram Stoker's Dracula. It's the big one. I mean, this book didn't invent the vampire, but it definitely propelled it into pop culture like never before. Because, without Dracula, there's no Anne Rice. There's no Interview with the Vampire. There's no Twilight. And I'm willing to make a very bold, very politically charged statement right now. Twilight fucks, dude. Like, if you're a Twilight hater, you're a liar. That shit rips, and you just don't know how to enjoy things. It's fun.
It's a fan fiction about Gerard Way, the writer.
It's fun. I don't like My Chemical Romance. I feel like that's probably my hottest take about anything. And I know that Twilight was originally a fan fiction about Gerard Way and the writer, and that if 9/11 never happened, we'd never get My Chemical Romance, which would mean we never get Twilight. But as its own thing, Twilight is kind of hilarious. Did you imprint on my daughter? Like, that shit's awesome. That shit's hilarious. I don't know. It's also like the fucking scene with like Edward stepping into like the vampire Vatican, or stepping out of it, and he goes to like reveal himself to this like anti-vampire parade. It's fucking insane. Also, the werewolves are sick as fuck. And you can't tell me that you didn't watch the scene with them like hearing thunder and getting excited because they could go play baseball, and you weren't like, oh, this is super badass. You know, like, apart from them all being like pedophiles, because they're like hundreds of years old dating teenagers, apart from that, this shit rips. And as I said earlier, vampires weren't just European. Like, again, there's across countless cultures and times, there are these vampire myths. Like in Persia, you had the blood-drinking demons carved on pottery. In Babylon and Assyria, you had the Lilith, which later becomes Lilith in Jewish folklore. And I will be doing a whole video on the figure of Lilith, because somehow, somewhere, people got it all fucking wrong. Like, long story short, she wasn't Adam's first wife and like the mother of magic. Like, that never shows up in these like myths. That's like, that showed up maybe 20 years ago. The Adam's first wife thing showed up earlier than 20 years ago. But still, it's not at all what like a lot of people try to say it is now. She was pretty much just like a boogeyman for like people to scare their kids into behaving. But again, I will cover that in a full video at a later date. In Greece and Rome, you had the Empuse, the Lamia, the Mormo, and the Strigi. And I'm gonna start fucking up some pronunciations, fair warning. In Africa, you had the Azenbosum, which are these like tree-dwelling vampires with iron teeth, and you have the Adzi, which are like firefly vampires. Super sick. Like, the Adzi are probably my favorite of those two. In the Caribbean, you have the Sucuyant. Latin America, you have the Patasola, the Quihuateteo. So sorry, and the Chupacabra. We all know we know the Chupacabra. The Quihuateteo I've never heard of until researching this video. So that's why I'm like, my pronunciation's dog shit on that one. And in the United States, we have the H word, I'm not gonna say, and also the Rougarou, which is a Cajun like werewolf vampire hybrid, which is what would happen if in Twilight Jacob impregnates Edward instead of Edward impregnating Bella. And if you want to learn more about Rougarous, you should look up Jacob impregnating Edward on like Google or like Reddit or Tumblr. Tumblr probably has the most of that shit. You know, you can go look it up for yourself. That is like the canon of how the Rougarou came about. In Japan, you have the Nukekubi, which is the floating heads, which are like super super sick. Which Junji Ito has a manga based on the Nukekubi, and it's super like scary and weird. And like recently, he did a redraw of what they would look like, and like instead of them being just like the floating heads, I think with like balloons, now they're like drones with decapitated heads. Super sick. You can go look it up. In the Philippines, they have the Mandarugo and the Manananggal. And the Manananggal are super fucking weird. They sneak into rooms and they suck the fetuses out of pregnant women with like long freaky tongues, which is probably like top 5 worst things I've ever heard. That is sick. I hate that so much. But you know, like, again, every culture has like some some version of a vampire, which raises the question, why? You know, like, why are bloodsuckers so universal? Some scholars, they say vampire myths were just a way for pre-industrial people to explain death and disease. I think that's kind of insulting. I mean, these people built cathedrals, empires, and the Industrial Revolution. Like, they weren't idiots. They understood death and even disease to an extent. I mean, people have been dying at that point for like at least 20 years. And like, I don't think we'd all universally land on a vampiric myth. Hell, we can't all universally land on a religion or a political stance. So I'm not buying that everyone was just like, people are dying, I guess it's a vampire. And that's also not me saying I think all vampires are real, you know, but like, I there has to be something, maybe even like way back, and even if it's just like a serial killer, you know, someone thought was dead, I don't know. But I feel like the notion that it's just, they were too stupid and didn't understand death and disease, so all these people made up vampires to kind of cope with that. I think that's, like I said, that's a bit insulting to those people. And you know, I don't think vampires are just like we don't understand germs. I think they're deeper. I think they're about the fear of the body after death. You know, about souls being lost, about disease, but also corruption and damnation. And that's why they've lasted for thousands of years. Like, that's why we're still talking about them today. And I mean, in the last video, you know, we had the Sleepy Time tea cult. So I made the tea. I tried the tea. I rated the tea. I think I gave it like a B or a C. And I'm not gonna drink blood on this video, or ever, really. That's not really in the cards for me. And I was thinking, you know, I could like really put on my chef hat, and I had like figured out this recipe for like a chili garlic steak tartare with these like honey garlic crostinis and red wine, and it was gonna be like a fun kind of like display of like one of my other hobbies, which is cooking. And I think for like a future video to kind of keep up with the whole like occult food thing, I probably will actually execute the recipe and the idea I had. But I didn't want this to come off like too, I don't know, try-hardy or whatever. So I'm just gonna eat some garlic and rate that. I have realized I have no fresh garlic in the house. So I grabbed some granulated garlic. Guess I'll just... Smells good.
Please make sure that's off my contacts. I can't have that.
Oh, it's so bad. F. God. F. That's fucking awful. Why do we put that in food? It's like rehydrating in my mouth. Oh, that shit got me feeling Chinese. F. So in conclusion, oh my god, it's like stuck in my teeth. Garlicky. Garlic. That was so good. Actually, S. So, in conclusion, the vampire we know today, pale, seductive, tragic, it's just the latest. Oh god, that's awful. It's the latest version of an ancient archetype, right? From bloated corpses and shrouds to Balkan villagers eating vampire blood bread, to Catholic symbols holding back the damned, to Bram Stoker's Dracula. Vampires have always been a reflection of what we fear most: death, corruption, and losing our souls. Which is why they'll never really die.